In the heart of a small African village, where the sun painted golden patterns on the dusty paths and the air carried the scent of ripe mango, a mother cried out in both joy and sorrow. She had given birth to twin girls, two perfect little souls, identical yet destined for separate fates. The village, bound by ancient beliefs, saw twins as a curse, a sign of misfortune. The elders gathered outside her hut, their faces grim, their decision final. One child must go. The mother, Naya, clutched both babies to her chest, her tears soaking their tiny blanket. She pleaded, begged for mercy, but the elders would not listen. To them, this was the way it had always been. The village could not risk angering the spirits. With trembling hands, she was forced to choose. One child, the stronger of the two, would stay and be raised in the village. The other, the one with softer cries, was taken from her arms and carried away into the dense forest, left at the mercy of fate. The night was heavy with silence. Under the tall baobab trees, where shadows danced and wild creatures lurked, the abandoned child whimpered. The wind whispered through the leaves, almost as if mourning the injustice. But fate had not abandoned the baby. A figure moved through the darkness, her steps sure and knowing. She was Mama Imani, the village healer, a woman with wisdom as deep as the roots of the earth. Drawn by an unseen force, she followed the sound of the infant's cries. When she found the tiny girl, wrapped in nothing but a thin cloth, she felt a stir in her heart. The child's small fingers curled around hers, as if claiming her as a mother. Mama Imani exhaled softly. "You were left, but you are not lost," she murmured, pressing the child to her chest. Without hesitation, she turned and disappeared into the forest, carrying the baby toward a fate no one could yet foresee. Zalema grew up in the village like a flower in full bloom. She was beautiful, with smooth, dark skin that glowed under the sun and eyes that sparkled like the river at dawn. From the moment she could walk, people admired her. Women praised her delicate features, and men spoke of how she would grow to be the most stunning young woman in the village. She carried herself with pride, knowing that beauty gave her power. When she walked through the marketplace, people stopped to compliment her. The village children followed her, hoping to be in her presence. Elders smiled at her, believing she would bring good fortune to their community. She never had to work too hard or struggle. People willingly did things for her, eager to win her favor. But far away from this admiration, deep in the forest, another life was unfolding. Masika, the twin sister no one knew existed, lived in the small hut of Mama Imani, the healer who had saved her. She did not grow up with praises or admiration. Instead, she learned the art of survival. As a baby, she had fallen ill with a terrible fever that nearly took her life. Though Mama Imani's remedies saved her, they could not prevent the scars the illness left behind. Her once soft skin became rough and uneven, as if the sickness had marked her forever. From the time Masika could understand, she knew she was different. She would look into the small pond near their hut and see a face that did not match the beauty she imagined in her heart. The villagers who occasionally visited Mama Imani for healing barely looked at her. When they did, their eyes held pity, or worse, disgust. Some even whispered that her scars were a sign of a curse, that perhaps she had been touched by bad spirits. Despite the rejection, Masika grew wise beyond her years. Mama Imani taught her everything she knew, the secrets of the plants, the way the earth could heal, and how to listen to the whispers of nature. By the time she was a young woman, Masika could mix the perfect remedy for any illness, soothe a crying baby with a simple touch, and heal wounds faster than anyone in the village. But no matter how much she helped, people still avoided her. If she walked toward the village, children hid behind their mothers, and young men turned away. Masika never complained. She buried herself in her work, tending to the herbs, grinding roots into powders, and memorizing the songs that called upon healing spirits. She learned to live in the shadows, to accept that she would never be admired like the beautiful girls in the village. But deep inside, a part of her ached. She wondered what it would feel like to be loved, to be seen not for her scars, but for the person she was beneath them. Meanwhile, Zalema thrived. She basked in the attention, growing more confident by the day. She learned early that her beauty gave her influence. When she laughed, people wanted to be close to her. When she spoke, her words carried weight. If she frowned, people rushed to fix whatever had upset her. She never questioned this life. It was all she had ever known. But what Zalema never knew, what no one in the village knew, was that somewhere beyond the trees, hidden away in the forest, there was another girl who shared her face. A girl who had been cast aside, but had grown into something stronger than anyone could have imagined. A girl whose destiny was about to collide with hers in ways neither of them could predict. The sun hung high over the village, casting long shadows as Masika walked through the dusty path, her basket of herbs strapped to her back. It was the first time she had come this far alone. Mama Imani had always warned her to be careful, to avoid the stares and whispers. But today, Masika had no choice. The healer had run out of an important route, one that could only be found in the market. As she stepped into the village, heads turned, conversations stopped, mothers pulled their children closer. The villagers were not used to seeing someone like her, someone with rough, uneven skin, someone whose face carried the scars of an illness they did not understand. Masika kept her head high, pretending not to notice the way people stared or whispered behind their hands. She had long learned to ignore the looks, to bury the sting of rejection deep inside her heart. She moved toward the center of the marketplace, where traders spread their goods on woven mats, their voices rising in the air as they called out their prices. She took a deep breath and approached a woman selling dried fish. "Excuse me, Mama," Masika said softly, reaching for a handful of coins. "Do you know where I can find Watala roots?" The woman barely looked at her. Instead, she wrinkled her nose as if Masika's very presence was offensive. "I don't have time for beggars," she snapped. "Go away." Masika's heart tightened, but she swallowed the hurt and moved forward. She tried again, this time with an old man selling clay pots. "Baba, please, I am looking for—" "Hey!" He cut her off, waving a hand. "What is this? Who let a thing like this in here?" His voice was loud enough for people nearby to hear. A ripple of laughter spread through the crowd. Masika felt their eyes on her, sharp and unforgiving. The feeling was familiar, but this time it was worse. Because she was alone. Because there was no Mama Imani to comfort her. Then a voice, smooth and confident, rang out above the laughter. "What is that?" Masika turned, and for the first time, she saw her. The girl stood tall, her skin glowing like polished mahogany, her hair braided neatly down her back. She was dressed in a fine wrapper, gold earrings dangling from her ears. The villagers turned their attention to her, their faces lighting up with admiration. Zalema. Masika didn't know why, but something about the girl made her chest tighten. There was something familiar, something she couldn't place. But before she could think, Zalema took a step forward, her beautiful face twisting in disgust. "Is this a person?" Zalema asked, looking Masika up and down. The crowd laughed again, emboldened by her words. "Or did someone let a wild animal into our village?" Masika's breath caught in her throat. She wanted to leave, to turn and run back to the forest, but her feet wouldn't move. Zalema circled her like a hunter playing with its prey. "Look at her skin," she continued loud enough for everyone to hear. "It looks like tree bark. Maybe she sleeps in the dirt with the goats." More laughter. Some villagers pointed. A group of children giggled, mimicking Zalema's words. Masika clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay still. She had faced rejection before, but never like this. Never so public, never with this much cruelty. Zalema flicked her wrist. "Go back to wherever you came from," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "We don't need ugly things spoiling our market." Masika's vision blurred with unshed tears. She had come here for something simple. She had come here to trade, to help Mama Imani, to do what she had been taught. But now, all she could feel was the weight of their laughter pressing against her chest, crushing her like a heavy stone. Without another word, she turned and walked away, her head held high, her heart breaking with every step. The laughter still echoed through the marketplace, sharp and cruel, cutting through Masika like a blade. Her heart pounded, her feet felt heavy, but she forced herself to keep walking, to push through the shame that wrapped around her like a suffocating cloth. She had been humiliated before, but never like this, never in front of an entire village. Just as she was about to disappear from sight, a deep, raspy voice sliced through the noise. "Fools!" the voice called out, making the laughter falter. "You mock what you do not understand." The villagers turned to see who had spoken. An old man stood at the edge of the marketplace, leaning on a twisted wooden staff. His clothes were tattered from long journeys, and his feet were thick with dust. His face was lined with age, but his eyes held a fire that had not dimmed. He was a traveller, a man who passed through villages, carrying story and whispers of things unseen. Some called him wise, others called him mad. Masika stopped walking, her breath caught in her throat. There was something about the old man, something unsettling, yet familiar. She did not know him, but his presence felt like an omen. Zalema, still standing tall in the center of the crowd, crossed her arms and smirked. "Who are you to interrupt our fun, old man?" she asked, her voice dripping with amusement. "Do you feel sorry for the ugly girl?" The old man ignored her, his gaze fixed on Masika. "This girl," he said, his voice strong despite his frail body, "is not what she seems." The villagers exchanged glances, some intrigued, others impatient. "Not what she seems," a man scoffed. "She is exactly what she seems. Scarred, strange, and pitiful." The crowd laughed again, but the old man did not flinch. He took a slow step forward, his staff tapping against the ground. "You laugh now," he said, his tone low and knowing. But laughter turns to silence when truth is revealed. The winds shift, and the river changes course. What is thrown away today may be the only thing that can save you tomorrow. Some villagers shuffled uncomfortably. They had heard his kind before, men who spoke in riddles, who saw beyond what the eye could see. Some believed such men carried the whispers of the spirits. Others dismissed them as mad wanderers. Zalema rolled her eyes, tossing her braids over her shoulder. "Save us," she repeated mockingly. "From what? A bad harvest? A dry season? Tell us, old man, what great power does this ugly girl carry?" She turned back to the villagers, urging them to laugh with her. Some did, others hesitated. The old man's eyes never left Masika. "There is a blessing upon her," he said, "a hidden gift, but only those who see with more than their eyes will know it." Masika swallowed hard, her fingers gripping the strap of her basket. A blessing? A gift? No one had ever spoken of her that way before. All her life, she had been nothing but the girl people avoided, the one who hid in the shadows. Zalema clicked her tongue in irritation. "Enough of this nonsense," she said. "We do not have time for stories from a dusty old traveller." She turned to the villagers. "Come, let's not waste our day on foolish words." The people, relieved to be free from the strange tension in the air, quickly agreed. They turned away, returning to their trades and conversations. The marketplace filled once more with noise, as if nothing had happened. But Masika felt different. The old man's words stayed with her, pressing against her chest, like a weight she did not yet understand. She wanted to ask him what he meant, but when she turned to look for him, he was already gone. The village was alive with excitement. Drums echoed through the air, and laughter rippled like a river through the crowd. It was the Festival of Beauty, the most anticipated event of the year, where the most beautiful girl in the village would be crowned. Women decorated their huts with bright fabrics, and men carved intricate masks for the dances. Everyone prepared for a night of celebration, music, and admiration. Zalema, as always, was at the center of it all. She walked through the village with a confidence that made heads turn. Her skin gleamed in the sunlight, and her dress, made from the finest woven cloth, hugged her figure perfectly. Everyone already knew she would win. She had won every year since she was old enough to compete. There was no question about it. Zalema was the village's beauty, but far away from the excitement, deep in the healer's hut, Masika sat in silence. She had never been to the festival. She had never even dared to think about it. What place did she have among those who were celebrated? She had spent her whole life hiding from their stares, their whispers. Why would she willingly walk into their world? Mama Imani, the healer, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You must go,"
she said firmly. Masika looked up, confused. Go, she repeated. To the festival. But why? I do not belong there. Mama Imani's wise eyes softened. There is something you must see, something that will change your fate. Masika hesitated. The festival was a place of beauty, of admiration. It was not a place for someone like her, but there was something in the healer's voice, something certain and unshakable. With a deep breath, Masika allowed Mama Imani to dress her in a simple, flowing cloth. It was not as fine as Zalema's, but it was clean and soft. The healer placed a small beaded necklace around her neck and gently smoothed Masika's hair. You are ready, she said. Masika did not feel ready, but as she stepped outside, feeling the evening breeze against her skin, something inside her shifted. She didn't know if it was fear or something else, something new. When she arrived at the festival, the noise around her seemed to quiet. Heads turned, eyes widened, whispers spread through the crowd like fire. What is she doing here? Someone murmured. Does she not know this is a festival for beauty? Another snickered. Zalema, standing tall in the center of the gathering, smirked. She crossed her arms and tilted her head, amusement dancing in her eyes. Well, well, she said loud enough for all to hear. The little wild woman has come to join us. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Masika felt her cheeks burn, but she kept walking. She did not know why she was here. She did not know why Mama Imani had sent her, but she would not turn back now. The village elders stepped forward to begin the ceremony. The sacred mirror, the object that would decide the festival's winner, was brought to the center of the gathering. The moment had arrived. Masika stood in the crowd, her heart pounding. She did not yet understand that nothing would ever be the same again. The festival reached its peak as the village elders stepped forward, their long robes flowing as they moved toward the sacred platform. The crowd hushed, anticipation crackling in the air like fire. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the unveiling of the sacred mirror. The mirror was no ordinary object. It was said to hold a power beyond human understanding, a truth that no eyes could see alone. Every year, the girl who stood before it was not judged only by her beauty, but by what lay beneath her skin. Two elders lifted a woven cloth, revealing the mirror's polished surface. It gleamed under the torchlight, its silver frame carved with intricate symbol. The villagers gasped, their eyes wide with wonder. The sacred mirror had never failed to show the truth. Zalema stepped forward first, just as expected. She walked with the grace of someone who had never doubted herself. She had been crowned the most beautiful for years, and tonight would be no different. As she stood before the mirror, the crowd held its breath. She lifted her chin, gazing into the glass. But the moment her reflection appeared, the air changed. A ripple seemed to move across the mirror's surface, like water disturbed by an unseen force. Zalema frowned. Something was wrong. Then, suddenly, the face in the mirror shifted. It was no longer her own. It was Masika's. A gasp tore through the crowd. Some villagers stepped back. Others clutched their mouths in shock. Zalema's heart pounded. She blinked, convinced it was a trick of the light. But no, Masika's scarred face still stared back at her, her deep, knowing eyes locked onto Zalema's. No! Zalema shouted, stumbling away from the mirror. Her voice trembled with something she had never felt before, fear. The villagers murmured in confusion, turning to Masika, who stood frozen at the edge of the gathering. She had not moved, had not even approached the mirror, and yet there she was, staring out from its reflection. The silence in the village square was thick, pressing against everyone like an unseen force. The sacred mirror still stood in the center, its surface shimmering with the impossible truth it had just revealed. Zalema's breath was shallow, her hands trembling as she stepped back. Her heart pounded in her chest. How could this be? How could that girl, that outcast have her face? The villagers were frozen, their eyes darting between Zalema and Masika. Whispers spread like wildfire, voices hushed yet urgent. What does this mean? Is this magic? How can they look the same? And then, from the crowd, Mama Imani stepped forward. The healer's face was calm, but her eyes held something deep, something heavy. She had known this day would come. Slowly, she raised her hand, and the murmurs died down. "There is no magic here," she said, her voice firm yet gentle. "Only truth." All eyes turned to her. The torches flickered, casting long shadows as the night air grew colder. Zalama swallowed hard, her throat dry. She wanted to run, to escape whatever this was, but her feet would not move. Mama Imani turned toward Masika, her expression softening. "My child, it is time you knew who you truly are." Masika's lips parted, confusion clouding her face. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The healer took a deep breath. "You were not meant to be apart. You and Zalama, you were born together. You are twins." A gasp swept through the crowd, louder this time, sharper. Even the elders, who had seen many things in their long lives, looked shaken. Twins. It was unthinkable. Zalama's body tensed. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "That's not possible. She looks nothing like me." Mama Imani's gaze was steady, because fate played a cruel trick. When you were born, your mother was afraid. In this village, twins were seen as a curse, a sign of misfortune. To protect you, she made a terrible choice. She kept one child and sent the other away. Masika felt her knees weaken. She'd always wondered why she was different, why she had no family of her own. Now the answer was staring her in the face. Zalema's breath hitched. "You're lying!" she snapped, her voice rising with panic. "This is some trick!" Mama Imani sighed, looking at Masika with sorrow. "The illness you suffered as a child changed your skin, your face, but it did not change your blood. You and Zalema are of the same flesh, the same life." Masika reached up, touching her face as if feeling it for the first time. All her life, she'd been called ugly, strange, unwanted. But now she realized that the person who had mocked her the most, who had treated her with the most cruelty, was her own sister. Zalema's mind raced. Memories flashed through her, her mother's strange sadness, the way the elders would sometimes look at her with something like pity. Had they known? Had she been living a lie all along? The villagers watched, eyes wide, waiting for someone to break the tension. Masika's voice was small, but it carried through the square. "You knew, and you never told me." Mama Imani's expression was pained. "I waited for the right time. I wanted you to be strong enough to hear the truth. And now, here we are." Zalama took a shaky step backward, her confidence cracking like glass. Her whole life, she'd believed she was special, chosen, different from everyone else. And now she was just half of something, half of someone. She turned to Masika, her mouth opening but no words came. What could she say? That she was sorry? That she hadn't known? That she had spent years humiliating the only person who shared her own blood? The weight of it was suffocating. The truth had been unveiled, and there was no escaping it now. The village square was silent, the weight of the revelation pressing down on everyone like a heavy storm cloud. The truth had been spoken. Zalama and Masika were twins, bound by blood, yet separated by fate. The villagers, who had once laughed at Masika, now stood in uneasy silence, stealing glances at Zalema. The girl they had worshipped for her beauty now looked shaken, unsure, lost. The elders stepped forward, their faces solemn. The oldest among them, a man with deep lines on his face and a voice like rolling thunder, lifted his hand. "Tonight, the sacred mirror has revealed a truth we did not expect. Beauty is not just what the eyes can see. It is the spirit, the heart, the actions one chooses. And now, Zalama must prove that her beauty is not only of the face, but also of the soul." Zalama's breath caught in her throat. "Prove?" she echoed, her voice unsteady. The elder nodded. "You have spent your life admired, praised, given all you ever desired. But what have you given in return? Tonight, you must show that you deserve the title you wear so proudly. You must perform a selfless act for your sister." A murmur spread through the crowd. Some villagers exchanged glances, eager to see what would happen. Others whispered, wondering if Zalama, the proud and vain girl they had always known, was even capable of such a thing. Masika stood still, her expression unreadable. She had no expectations of Zalema. How could she? This was the same sister who had humiliated her, mocked her, treated her as nothing. What could she possibly do now? Zalema's fingers trembled as she clenched them into fists. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to be the star of the festival, the winner, the one who walked away with a crown. Not this. Not a test. She turned toward the elders. What must I do? The elders' eyes, though old, were sharp. That is for you to decide. A true act of the heart cannot be forced. It must come from within. Zalema swallowed hard. She looked at Masika, really looked at her for the first time. She saw past the scars, past the roughness of her skin. She saw the quiet strength in her eyes, the pain she had carried alone for years. A sister she had never known, never wanted to know. Her mind raced. What could she do? What did Masika even want? A gift, an apology. None of it felt like enough. The villagers waited, their eyes locked on Zalema. She could feel their judgment, their doubt. She had always been adored, but now for the first time she was being tested, and she had no idea if she could pass. She took a deep breath. There was only one thing she could do, something she had never done before. She had to let go of her pride. She had to open her heart. Zalema stepped forward, and all eyes followed her. The test had begun. Zalema stood frozen, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. The weight of the elder's words pressed down on her, heavier than anything she had ever carried. The entire village watched in silence, waiting. She had spent her whole life adored, praised for her beauty, treated like royalty. But now, in this moment, none of that mattered. She had mocked, she had humiliated, and she had turned her back on the very person who shared her own blood. Her throat tightened as she looked at Masika, the sister she had never known, the sister she had laughed at, called ugly, treated like she was nothing. And yet, Masika had not shown anger or hatred. She had stood strong, carrying her pain alone. Something inside Zalema cracked. A deep, painful realization clawed at her chest. She had been blind, she had been cruel, and now she had to face the truth. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to move. Step by step, she walked toward Masika. The villagers murmured, some in shock, others in disbelief. Zalema, the proud, the untouchable, was walking toward the very girl she had mocked. And then, without warning, Zalema dropped to her knees. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Never in all her life had Zalema bowed to anyone, but now she knelt before Masika, her hands trembling, her head bowed low. Tears welled in her eyes. "I was wrong," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I was blind. I was selfish. I hurt you." She lifted her gaze, her eyes searching Masika's face. "Please forgive me." Masika stared at her, stunned. Her whole life, she had never imagined this moment. Never had she expected Zalema to see her, to acknowledge her pain. A lump formed in her throat as she looked at the girl who shared her face, the sister she had longed for without knowing. The village was silent. No one dared to speak. No one dared to move. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, Masika stepped forward. She reached out, her fingers hesitant, as if unsure this was real. And then, with a deep breath, she pulled Zalema into an embrace. The moment their arms wrapped around each other, something incredible happened. A single tear slipped from Masika's eye, falling gently onto her cheek, and as it touched her skin, a shimmer of light flickered around her. The scars that had marked her face for years, the roughness that had set her apart, began to fade. The villagers gasped, eyes wide in shock. Zalema pulled back, watching in disbelief as Masika's skin grew smooth, her beauty revealed in full. But it was not just a change of appearance. It was as if the weight of years of pain had lifted, as if the invisible chains around her had finally broken. Mama Imani stepped forward, her wise eyes filled with warmth. "The curse was never in her skin," she said softly. "The curse was in the way she was treated, the pain she carried. But love has the power to heal." Zalema's breath hitched. She reached out, touching Masika's face, her fingers brushing against the softness that had replaced the scars. A fresh wave of tears spilled down her cheeks. Masika smiled, a small, uncertain smile. "Sister," she whispered. Zalema let out a shaky laugh, nodding. "Sister." The village erupted into cheers, their voices rising into the night. The sisters had found each other, and with that, they had found something even greater, the power of love, humility, and forgiveness. The village had never witnessed a night like this before. The air was thick with emotion, hearts still pounding from the miracle they had just seen. Masika stood among them, no longer the outcast, no longer the girl they whispered about in the shadows. She was no longer hidden beneath the weight of scars or the burden of loneliness. For the first time in her life, she was seen, not for her past, not for her appearance, but for who she truly was. Zalema still knelt before her, tears streaking her once proud face. The girl who had once stood above all, basking in admiration, now found herself humbled in front of the sister she had once despised. The villagers who had once laughed at Masika now looked at her with awe, respect, and even shame. Then, an elder stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of wisdom. Tonight, we have learned a truth we long ignored. Beauty is not in the face alone, nor is it in the things we praise. Beauty is in the heart, in the kindness we show, in the love we give. And tonight, we honor not just Zalema, but Masika, who carried the strength of true beauty all along. The villagers cheered, their voices echoing through the night. Women rushed forward, placing colorful beads around Masika's neck, draping her in beautiful fabrics, treating her as one of their own. Children reached out to touch her hands, no longer afraid, no longer seeing her as something strange. Zalema stood up slowly, her hands still shaking, her heart full. She turned to Masika, her voice soft but steady. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I will spend the rest of my life making this right. Masika smiled, the warmth of it spreading through her like sunlight. We will do it together, sister. From that day on, the village changed. Masika was no longer an outsider. She was loved, respected, honored. People came to her for healing, not just of the body, but of the heart. Her story spread beyond the village, becoming a lesson for all who heard it. And Zalema, she too changed. She no longer walked with arrogance, no longer judged with shallow eyes. She saw the world differently now. She saw that true beauty was not in what one wore or how perfect one's face was, but in kindness, in love, in the light one carried within. The two sisters, once separated by fate, now stood together, side by side, one a symbol of resilience, the other a lesson in redemption. And as they walked through the village, hands intertwined, they became a story that would be told for generations. A story of loss, of love, and of the truth that cruelty blinds, but kindness reveals all. Thank you for watching this powerful story of love, redemption, and true beauty. Let this be a reminder that kindness sees what the eyes cannot. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and comment your thoughts below. Would you have forgiven Zalema? Let's talk in the comments. See you in the next story.